Well, I'm going to read excerpts from a piece by Warsan Shire. Warsan Shire is a Somali poet and writer who immigrated to London and lives there currently. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats. The boy who went to school with, who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory, is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. It's not something you ever thought of doing until the blade burnt threats into your neck, and even then you carried the anthem under your breath, only tearing up your passport in an airport toilet, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear that you wouldn't be going back. You have to understand that no one puts their children in the boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one burns their palms under trains beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled means something more than the journey. No one crawls under fences. No one wants to be beaten, pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches where your body is left aching. I want to go home. But home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun. And no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore. Unless home told you to quicken your legs, leave your clothes behind, crawl through the desert, wade through the oceans, drown, save, be hunger, beg, forget pride. Your survival is more important. No one leaves home until home is a sweaty voice in your ear saying, leave. Run away from me now. I don't know what I'm becoming, but I know that anywhere is safer than here. A young child stared at a crowded room. He wasn't forming any conscious memories of this, but he still felt the anxiety and the excitement of those that were around him. People in the crowd were exhausted, not to mention filthy. They'd been on a ship for weeks, and not everyone survived the journey. Most of them had no idea where they were going, but it had to be better than where they were coming from, because their home in Russia was a burning building, and this was their leap of faith that the United States would be better. So 2 parents and a 1-year-old boy made their way through Ellis Island, gave their names to an agent, probably spelled wrong, or maybe even changed altogether. But Samuel Prodger and his family had made it. 1907 marked the beginning of a better life, a life away from the violent outbursts against Jews in Russia, away from the Pale of Settlement, a ghetto to keep them segregated and oppressed. This life would be about hope, about making a home here in America, making a future for Samuel and eventually for his siblings. Despite a sizable Jewish population in New York, that wasn't the destination Samuel's parents had in mind for the long run. 6 or 7 years later, they would move to Atlanta, where a distant cousin lived. And even though they stood out as Jews in the South, They had given a life of endless possibilities to Samuel. Samuel Prodger was my great-grandfather. And this was his immigration story. And his story is one among many reasons why the situation at the border breaks my heart. Why I cannot fathom a wall that seeks to divide, or paying for asylum, or limiting refugees allowed in to all-time lows. It feels like a betrayal of American values, let alone UU values. Because my family found refuge from an untenable situation, and they were able to create a beautiful life. It is the quintessential American narrative that unless you are a Native American or the descendant of a slave who was forced into this land, you have a story in your history about a treacherous journey away from a place that could no longer be considered your homeland. And it brought you and your family here. And it can be hard to understand how one can receive something beautiful and not want to extend that same gift. How is it that our society does not believe that others deserve the same gift that we ourselves received? Our universalist heritage calls us to believe that everyone is worthy of grace. And what is more grace-filled than the opportunity to create your homeland in a place that really and truly welcomes you and all that you bring? A place that wants you to thrive, to experience joy, and to extend that gift outward. Sounds like a fevered dream, doesn't it? Because right now, our country does not feel welcoming. It feels pretty far from welcoming, from seeking each other's dignity and extending open arms to those in need of a new beginning. But then again, this beautiful homeland that some of us got to create wasn't actually a homeland when many of us first arrived. It's hard for me not to consider the legacy of Irish, Italian, and Jewish immigration stories. When people first started immigrating in large numbers from Ireland, they were not welcome here. Many of you may be familiar with the No Irish Need Apply signs. But that was only one manifestation of rampant anti-Irish sentiments in the 19th century. And the Irish were certainly not the only group of immigrants that weren't welcomed with open arms. And the more that I've learned about our history with immigration, the more I think that my great-grandfather's story is completely impossible. How is it that he created a homeland so quickly? Well, the answer is that he didn't. About 6 years ago, I discovered that his story had some incredible secrets that he'd gone through great lengths to protect us from. We discovered that Samuel had 2 sisters that I'd never even known about. One of them was an older sister who was 12 when they all made the journey from Russia. She broke her leg in the process, and a week after they arrived, she died of sepsis. And suddenly, her son Shire's home feels so profoundly personal. No one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. The risk of dying en route to America was somehow better than the risk they faced if they stayed. And even worse than the heartbreak that they endured losing their eldest child was the atrocity they experienced with Samuel's younger sister. For the simple reason that they were Jewish, someone decided to set her baby carriage on fire, and the flames took her life. America was not a homeland for his family. It was still part of their treacherous journey. And it may leave us wondering if there is any hope for communal redemption. As most of you know, I come from a Jewish and Christian background, and both of them deeply influence my Unitarian Universalist ministry. And I spend a lot of time thinking about the concept of homeland and what it means in our context. Because journeying towards a homeland is such a powerful image for UUs, since so many of us migrated from other traditions that never quite felt like home, places that we didn't necessarily feel safe. And I believe that part of what makes Unitarian Universalism a home for so many people from different spiritual backgrounds is that part of our very identity is a call to embrace each other's wounds, to listen to each other's stories and use them as a point of empathy and growth. So our call to be a sanctuary to those who seek physical refuge is intertwined with our call to be a refuge for all whose spirits are weary, for anyone who's been denied their dignity. 4 years ago, I was privileged to serve as a chaplain in a justice ministry border trip to Tijuana. We spent most of the time meeting with people who'd been deported. And one of the women that I talked to was in a shelter. Her name was Maria. She'd been living with her son and grandchild when her son was killed. But what she focused on was that her grandchild was safe with her daughter-in-law, still living in the United States. She told us that even though she dreamt of seeing her family again every day, she was filled with hope for her future. She noted that it was the season of Lent, which commemorates Jesus spending 40 days in the desert before making his way back to Jerusalem. And with a smile on her face, she said, "This is my desert, and I will make it home, because God is with me every time I tell my story." We might not all believe in a God, but we do believe in the power of connection through sharing our stories. And if there is anything that Unitarian Universalism teaches us, it's that spiritual redemption is possible precisely because we can work towards creating a communal redemption. That is where our hope lies. Our call is to jointly make UU a homeland while making the United States and even the world a homeland for all who seek. We all carry with us both emotional and spiritual wounds that need tending to. But when we do tend to them, the beautiful result is empathy. The more we talk to each other about the homeland we're trying to build and the journey that we've taken so far, the more that we work towards actually creating an equitable and love-centered space. One that honors who we are and invites others in. One of the most powerful tools that we have towards changing policy is changing hearts and minds. And it is possible. About 8 years ago, a young man named Derek Black went through such a transformation. Derek was a self-proclaimed white nationalist. His father ran the Alabama KKK, and David Duke was his godfather. Derek was considered a white nationalist protege. But when he went to college, he became friends with Juan, a Peruvian immigrant, Matthew, an Orthodox Jew, and Allison, a Jewish woman that he fell in love with. They invited him, knowing his background, to have weekly Shabbat. And it was through this compassionate challenge that Derek changed his thinking and became a vocal anti-racist. Juan, Matthew, and Allison had the courage to tell Derek their stories and to also seek out Derek's so that he could see the harm that his beliefs were causing his friends, so that he could tend to his wounds and open himself to the wounds of others. This is the power of storytelling, and this is why there is hope. We create a homeland by telling and hearing each other's stories, by seeking stories that are nothing like ours and stories that feel like a mirror. As Americans, we are not the only ones to struggle with this. The current violence in Syria is a reminder that emotional wounds can fester anywhere, leading many to wonder whether our redemption story dies in the desert. But it doesn't. Just as Maria said, it is only through the desert that we make it to our homeland. New York had been my great-grandfather's desert, but somehow he found enough grace to welcome my Christian father into his family, because I think he believed that redemption was more powerful than his wounds. And in that, he made a declaration to his family that our home would be a universal one. So, friends, let us truly make this land a home for everyone, because it will not be a home for any of us until it is a home for all of us. It will be hard. It will be arduous, and many of us will not see the fruits of our labors. But the communal redemption that we seek is so much greater than our individual heartbreak, because we aren't alone. We are UU, and that means we are called to love every single person, regardless of where they come from and how they journeyed towards us, because we are journeying too. And our collective heart, which has created a spiritual homeland for so many, will create a physical homeland too. It is worth our work. Even though some of us are still in the desert, we will make it to our homeland, because I believe we are courageous, and we will tell our stories. The fire may burn hot under our feet, but the fire of commitment will outlast it, because the desert is our path home. May we bless all our fellow wanderers and take them with us on our journey to our beloved homeland. Blessed be, and amen.